In today's episode of
Wow, how'd you code that?
we're going to discuss just what in the Log4Shell happened in the industry this past week.
Log4 what?
Log4Shell is the nickname given to the Apache Log4J vulnerability discovered on November 24, 2021. This vulnerability is one of the most serious that Jen Easterly, director of the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, has seen in her entire career.
The Log4j vulnerability is the most serious vulnerability that I've seen in my decades-long career.
If left unpatched, the bug in the Java logging library Apache Log4J could be used by cyber attackers to take over computer servers, potentially putting everything from consumer electronics to government and corporate systems at risk of a cyber attack.
What exactly is Log4j and how is it used?
How should organizations plan to mitigate the risk imposed?
What can we expect in the next few months as remediation efforts ramp up across the tech industry?
Could this be the beginning of the end for Oracle's hugely popular Java programming language?
Stay tuned for answers to these questions and more. And if you haven't hit the like button and subscribe to this channel, do that now.
Apache's Log4j is a free and open source logging library that software engineers implement to record how programs run. They allow for code auditing and are a standard mechanism to investigate bugs and other functionality issues. The Log4Shell vulnerability allows unauthenticated remote code execution, triggered by a string provided by the attacker, through various input vectors parsed and processed by the Log4j vulnerable component. The vulnerability uses the Java naming and directory interface, which is used by a Java program to find data, typically through a directory, commonly an LDAP directory in the case of this vulnerability. Since Log4j is free and widely trusted, companies large and small have been employing it in a wide range of use cases for many years. It should come as no surprise then that potentially hundreds of millions of devices could be impacted by this vulnerability.
It is a piece of software, open source, that's in millions of devices, from video games to hospital equipment to industrial control systems to cloud services. It is trivial to exploit as a vulnerability. Essentially 12 characters, and a remote unauthenticated attacker can take over a system, can use it for stealing data, can use it for ransomware attacks, all manner of malicious activity. And it takes a very focused effort to be able to find and to fix the vulnerability because it's open source, so it is in all manner of vendor products.
The Log4Shell vulnerability is making headlines because of how pervasive the Log4j library is, and just how easy it is to exploit. And given how the library is packaged, identifying exposure is often challenging. For example, Java archive files contain all application dependencies, including the Log4j library. However, a jar file can also include another jar file, having another jar file, essentially nesting this vulnerability several layers deep.
This is not something that is going to be patched and finished. This is something that we're going to be working on likely for months, if not years, just given the ubiquity of the software and the ease of exploitation.
The first step in mitigating the risk imposed by the Log4Shell vulnerability is identifying your level of exposure. SIFT is a command line interface tool developed by Anchor that generates accurate software bill of materials for container images and file systems. Cripe is an easy-to-integrate open-source vulnerability scanning tool. Both tools can scan many package dependency formats, including nested jar files, and report if they contain the Log4Shell vulnerability. I also recommend using a Log4j vulnerability testing tool, like this one developed by Trend Micro, to help assess your environment. Once you've determined remediation is required, the next step is to apply a patch or eliminate the threat. As of December 17, 2021, the latest version of Apache's Log4j library is 2.17.0. It is important to note that versions 2.0 Alpha 1 through 2.16.0 did not protect from denial of service attacks. I strongly advise that you patch your applications with the latest version of the Apache Log4j library to remediate the denial of service vulnerability.
Once vendors apply the patch on their end, won't this simply resolve itself? Why do I need to do anything?
This is something that everybody should be concerned about, not because of where it came from, but because this is incredibly dangerous to everybody's business, everybody's networks, everybody's system, and we really need to be focused on what we need to do to mitigate the risk of this vulnerability being exploited in a very widespread way.
Now that you've identified the risk and have put together a remediation plan, There are two things that governments and businesses should avoid at all costs. First, to effectively mitigate the risk associated with this vulnerability, everyone must act judiciously and quickly. Doing nothing is not an option. Second, do not attempt to patch this vulnerability using internal methods. The implementation of a workaround simply transfers risk. The best course of action to reduce or eliminate the risk associated with this vulnerability is to apply the recommended Log4J patch. While I do not foresee any material impact on Oracle's bottom line due to the Log4J vulnerability, I believe this issue will propel the United States government to enact legislation to improve the nation's overall cybersecurity posture. Earlier this year, the Commerce Department and National Telecommunications and Information Administration were directed by the Executive Office to publish the minimum elements for a software bill of materials, a key tool to help create a more transparent and secure software supply chain. As the President notes, the trust we place in our digital infrastructure should be proportional to how trustworthy and transparent that infrastructure is. You can certainly expect to hear more about this initiative in the coming year. I've put together a living document containing a list of resources that were discussed during this video. You may scan the QR code at the bottom right corner of this screen to access it. Thank you for watching this video. To all my subscribers, thank you for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of
Wow. How'd you code that?